we also took their stories, and I feel really funny. I feel uncomfortable calling them stories because I don't know how the Winitam, how the non-native people look at stories. Stories can be made up. So the word I choose to use is Snowiath. Snowiath is our traditional teachings, our traditional laws. Because within those tellings, that's where our purpose and our responsibilities are given to us. And from that study, we created maps. We have a phenomenal GIS team, and we put our history on those maps, and they become ours. And we're using the white man's tool to show. You're going to make us jump through these hoops? Well, we're going to put our story down there, and you can't have no say about that. Then what we did from there is we created our stewardship policy. Our stewardship policy is for anyone who's coming into our traditional lands and waters to do any kind of development, they have to follow all these rules. One is what kind of harm or what kind of damage will it do to the environment and the Tsleil-Waututh people? And two, will this be a benefit to the Tsleil-Waututh people and their future generations? So when Kinder Morgan came along, they tried engaging us really early. And we told them, no, we're not talking to you. We demand to talk to the federal government. So we wrote letters to then Minister Joe Oliver, and we said to him, you cannot delegate your authority to a third party such as Kinder Morgan to fulfill your obligation of duty to consult. You can't do that. I think the first letter we sent in October or something like that, we didn't get an answer for like 6 months. And then his weak-ass answer was, no, you have to go through the NEB process. The NEB process is there for you to go through. And this kind of dialogue went back and forth for a little while, and then we decided, well, we have to jump through another hoop. And so we entered the NEB process, we became an intervener. They sent us a piddly amount of money to accept, and we almost didn't accept it, but we already had spent a lot of money, so we took it. And then we turned around and asked for a leave to appeal. And I think they didn't know what to do with that. So our legal team told us we only needed one issue to be accepted by the Federal Court of Appeal. So we laid down 4 issues, and all 4 issues were accepted. So in May of 2015, May 2014, we launched it. In July that year, we were told we could go forward in the Federal Court of Appeal. And then the following year was when we got our first court date in the Federal Court of Appeal. So while we're doing that, we're also building up our case in presenting to the NEB. We didn't follow their rules there either. We had to come up to Chilliwack to present our evidence at the oral traditional hearings. And we're sitting around the table at the office, and I said, you know what, how can I be comfortable sharing our most precious, intimate knowledge of who we are to a panel of Winitam that I don't even know what kind of background they have in terms of listening to First Nations history. And so what we did was we did ceremony. Prior to all of our big events or big hard work that we do, we always went to ceremony. So we worked with the Stalo people and we had ceremony up in the Stalo territory. And then the next morning we went into the room and one of the healers, one of the medicine people of the Stalo cleansed the room, and we used cedar to cleanse. And then we left the cedar branches on all the tables where the panel was sitting, where Kinder Morgan lawyers were sitting, where the federal government lawyers were sitting, and then where the interveners sat themselves. And it was pretty powerful. So, and we also decided not to send our elders because we heard what happened to, especially the Helsing elders during the Enbridge hearing. It was just so disrespectful. So we put forward two of our speakers. My sister is Leah George Wilson. She's now a lawyer, so she was like an interpreter, and we also put up our cultural spokesperson, Gabriel George, who is the grandson of Chief Dan, who is the son of Leonard George. And so as Gabriel Satuano was telling our history, he felt compelled to sing a song to go with whatever, that song that told about that history. And while we were sitting there, it was just a real spontaneous thing that Gabriel held a rattle, just to help keep him grounded. And as he finished telling the story, the song just started coming out of him. And so all the people that were there from Senative, there was about 40 of us in the audience, we all stood up and we sang with them. And you should have seen all the lawyers. They just couldn't believe what they were witnessing. And somebody was telling me the panel didn't even know what to do because everybody stood up. So I think, was that you? No, it was Hannah was telling me that eventually the panel also stood up. So I think the way that Senative does our things is a real, we take our time. We take our time and we make sure that people are comfortable with the words that we're saying, because sometimes those words that are coming out are going to be really hurtful. And we all know how hard it is to hear the truth. So part of my job, I attended all the hearings that had First Nations traditional oral hearings. So I spent the week in Chilliwack. I traveled up here to Kamloops and spent the week here. And then I traveled down to Victoria and spent the week there. And I can tell you that every First Nations that came before that NAV board told them this is not a form of consultation, because that's what we're all worried about, that the government will go back and say, oh yeah, this was consultation. Kindergarten vote, yeah, this was consultation. And every First Nations group that came before that board told them the name of the people, what it stands for, and how deep those connections are to the lands and waters where they come from. Another phrase just popped into my head. Gabriel, we had a water ceremony. We had a canoe journey from Ambleside Park, where the Squamish people are, and there was about 15. Ruby told the story yesterday. There were about 15 canoes that traveled from Ambleside Park to Cades Park, Quayawichin. But before they came to the beach, they went out to Kinder Morgan, and that was the first time in our living memory that we knew that we had heard or we had performed a water ceremony. So it was really powerful. And at that time, the media is out there trying to drag you down and trying to turn you into these radicals, these Indians that are always asking for everything and they don't do nothing and blah, blah, blah. But my husband was inspired. He said, we are not protesting, we are protecting. So every time I hear of a First Nations group of people out there on the land, protecting the land, I don't see them as protesters. I don't see them as radicals. I have high honor and respect for them because that is something that I can't do right now because we're in court. If I could, I would be out there on the land with you. Because like Rita was saying, decisions that we make are going to have an impact on those downstream from us. So where we are, the hugest impact are going to be the tankers. They're going to grow from 4 tankers a month to like 36 or 40 tankers a month. That's incredible. That's just stupid. So each of those tankers are coming in and they're going out, and what impact are they going to have on the coastal people, on the West Coast people? And depending which way they go, they're going to impact our relatives in the South, and they're going to impact our relatives in the North. And that's how we all have to come together. And I don't know how we can do that, but we need to find a way. There's been talk these last 2 days about international pressure and going that route. I think that's important. Arthur was mentioning the first day we were here about a multiplicity of actions. So we think about the actions that we can do as individuals, that we can do as communities, that we can do it regionally and provincially, nationally and internationally. We have to have movement. We have to have people working on all those fronts because I have a feeling we're gonna win really big when we come together. Like Ruben said yesterday, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh have come together, but in all honesty, we've only come together in a really economic development kind of way because, you know, with all the court cases, First Nations get first right to refusal of Crown lands. And so we had to get together because of some Crown lands within the city of Vancouver. If we didn't get our shit together, that would go somewhere else. So we got together because we could see the benefit of working together on developing these lands that are already developed. So our next move is to come together politically like you guys did yesterday or the last 2 days within your alliance. We have to come together, strategize together. I was just talking with some people this afternoon, you know, have a whiteboard session, you know, put up there what you think, what we need to be doing collectively and individually as nations, and then group them, and then prioritize them, and then figure out who's got the capacity to work in this area, who's got the funds to work in this area, and how do we chip in for those? Because the more we stay fractured as Indigenous peoples of this country, the easier it is for the government to control us. And we can stand here and say the government doesn't control us, but in my world they do. They have this string on us. We can only go so far and then we get choked back. But we're going farther and farther with that string, and I think we can do it by working together. Like learning from Sherry and what happened over there in Nova Scotia. When that was happening, I think I was a little, well, obviously I was younger than I am today, but I really felt for them because those people were out practicing what their ancestors had did hundreds of years ago. And we shouldn't have to be fighting for that. And court case after court case is showing us. So I'm really hoping that with our NEB, with our Federal Court of Appeal case, that it will break something wide open. And that it'll be easier for us to come together because one people have gone forward, have taken that chance, have taken that risk. It's making us financially, it's a huge financial burden. But when I started my job in 2012, this job with the Sacred Trust, I only had 2 grandchildren. Now we have 5. So if that's just me and my family, and I don't know how many dozens more were born in my community in the last 3 years, multiply that by all the First Nations here in British Columbia, we can't not sit down and do nothing. If it means coming here or coming in a circle and spilling your guts, saying, I need help here, or how can we work together? Let's put aside our internal politics, because this is the big fight. This is what we need to come up against. And I get the feeling that that we're going to win it because of the different factors that are going on in the world. And I can't remember if it was Arthur or somebody was saying, Canada is going to need us, Indigenous peoples, to help grow their economy. But we're going to grow that economy that is sustainable so that these little ones and my grandchildren to come will have a place to not only live, but benefit from. My Auntie Marie, Ruben's mom, always said to us, when you stop, when you can't think of anything more to say, then you've said enough. So I'm going to sit down.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank the Secaucus Nation for allowing us to come out to their territory to speak about what we're doing and to share stories so that we can perhaps work together in a stronger and bigger and more powerful way in the future. My name is Hogestai, means man who sleeps beside water. I'm from the people of the sky, the Hosansi, the clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. And I'm here to talk about some of the mega projects going on in Wet'suwet'en territory, ones that we've been facing off with since I was a child. And even before that, the first major project that kind of really hit our territory is that we had gold rushes and logging and lots of small mines kind of popping up all throughout our territories. When I was a child, I remember my dad talked fondly about them because he was a miner and he was a logger. He spent a lot of his life doing that kind of stuff. And it was just tiny little mines. Like him and his brother bought a mining license and they did a strip mine on the surface. And they were looking for gold, and it was a pretty tiny little operation. And he talked about his experience doing that. But when I was a child, he talked about how different it was. He said that the mines that are coming out today are huge, but nothing close to what they are today. But even before that, in 1952, there was a massive hydroelectric project that was proposed for our territories. And that project was called the Commando Project. And, it was Alcan Smelters, an aluminum smelter in Kitimat, that worked with the BC government to destroy the entire bottom half of our traditional territories. Like Frida mentioned, there's 22,000 square kilometers of territory where people own. We had a massive caribou herd that used to travel through our territory back down into Secaucus territory and back up again. They were migrating herd of caribou that people accessed. A lot of different nations talked about having access to this caribou herd. And in 1952, when the Commando Project came in, they flooded out a place called the Utsa Reservoir. There were 2 rivers, one flowed to the coast and one flowed to the Fraser. When they dammed both sides of that, they ended up damming created one of the biggest man-made lakes in BC. Huge. And they didn't log anything, they just kind of flooded an area that was forested. And at caribou herd that we had going through there was a hunter, Wet'suwet'en hunter that was traveling through. He was living out in the territories and he came back from trapping and hunting in his territory, back to his home community. And then he was walking towards his home community, and all of a sudden the trail that he took kind of disappeared into this lake, and he's wondering what the hell happened. And he followed the edge of the lake shore for a while, and he came across a whole pile of like little baby caribous that were stuck on the shoreline. And he looked out in the water, and he saw all these treetops sticking out all over the place. And the parents of those caribou were tangled up in the trees and they drowned. That's our history. That's the first bit of history we have with the mega project hitting our territory. The Commando project, and we still have to deal with it today. There's mercury poisoning that occurs there because they didn't log it out. All the organic matter underneath is creating a dense organic mass at the base of this lake, and it's producing mercury. And people who do any fishing in and around here are told and advised by the Ministry of Environment to not eat more than one of those trout a month, because there's a high risk of them getting mercury poisoning. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of mining activity that occurs through our territories, and my dad talked about a lot. We actually traveled into one of his territories. So actually Frida's dad's territory, and he looked after it as well. They had to deal with a mining company called an Equity Mine. The Equity Mine is a silver mine that was created back in, I think, 1978, when first started working on it. The mine was in full operation in 1982 and 83. They hired a lot of people, like the town of Houston just flourished. There's new apartment buildings going up for the workers, and it was a super busy place. And I was just a little boy at the time. I remember how busy it was. My dad went out and did a bit of work with them for a bit too. But in 1984, that mine that they had a tailings pond. And much like the poly mine disaster that occurred here in Sequoia territory, the tailings pond for the Equity Mine burst. And they didn't know how to deal with it. They couldn't contain it. I traveled through my people's territories. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and my parents, as well as many other elders in my lifetime, traveling to different parts of the territories. And there's one particular part of the territory that is just downstream from Equity Mine. There's beautiful waterfalls, and people used to go there a lot. It's an old battleground. It's an old place where people fought the Tuscaloosa, when the Tuscaloosa and that had been tried to kind of make their way into our territories. So we fought in this huge battleground. But the place where the waterfall is, we used to catch salmon. We used to hang our fishing tools in the trees around the waterfall. And we went back after the 1984 spill, and the salmon were gone. The salmon run that we used to harvest every year there were gone, just disappeared. That mine, the Equity Mine disaster, wiped out an entire salmon run that we used to have access to, that fed our people. Goosey Lake is right below Equity Mine. And there's stories of our people walking into the water. It was so plentiful. It was the richest territory of our people. The war chiefs in our history lived there with their clan because it was the richest territory that provided the most. There were stories of our people walking into the water, and you just take off the straw hat and walk through the water and pull little trout out, fill our hat with trout. It was so plentiful. You can't do that anymore. I was talking with a biologist 4 years ago that does work up at Equity Mine. And he was talking about, I asked him specifically, I was up there with a group of students from the mining group. I used to teach as well. I used to teach environmental monitoring for the colleges. And I brought some students up there, and I talked to the biologist there, and I said, well, how long is this place going to stay like this? How long do you guys have to keep treating the tailings waste that's coming out of the tailings ponds? It's no longer an operating mine. But the BC government funds it to try and clean up the mess that happened in 1984. And he said it's going to be at least 1.5 more billion years of treatment. And I said, well, who's going to look after this place in 1,000 years? He said, I don't know. But it's going to keep polluting the waters for at least 1.5 million years more. Can you imagine how frustrating that is for people? And he said they're still catching, like, I asked, what's happening with the trout that are in Goosey Lake? And they said, well, we're still catching trout, and the trout, we're still pulling out trout that have 3 eyes.
Oh my God.
Some of them have blisters on. This was touted as one of the biggest mining disasters in North American history in 1984. And Mount Polley rivals that. This is the legacy that our people have to live with in terms of mining. The Huckleberry Mine, Imperial Metals. Thank you, those guys are going to be shutting down this year. Thank God. That's my clan's territory. My clan has a rich history. We work closely with the Unistalta. That's our history. We have a close relationship with the Unistalta. We work closely with them. Our territories are right beside this. And that mine is finally closing. They had nothing, they had no relationship with us. They didn't even attempt to develop a relationship with the people. They just put the mine in. They worked with the local bands, they signed agreements, they put the mine in, and we're still standing here. What the heck is going on? We didn't give you guys any consent to go and put this in. So again, thankfully those guys are shutting down. Freedom, or when we first started going, one of the things that we did initially, we weren't badass radicals like a lot of you might think. We're just normal people. I ran a small company, and she was working as an economic development officer. And I grew up with my grandparents. I did hunting and trapping and fishing, and I was an outdoors person. My nickname when I was in my 20s was Bushman, because I was always gone in the bush. I was out camping, I was doing winter camping, summer camping, fishing, hunting, trapping, everything. And when her and I first got together, I said, well, why don't we get out in the territory and do more stuff? So we started going and doing that. We enjoyed a lot of outdoor activities. We brought her out to different places where our ancestors were, my grandparents, and all the elders in my community spent a lot of time with me, growing up, showing me all these beautiful places and the history around. We went up to one of our territories and we encountered it. The road was plowed for some reason. I brought a snowmobile because I thought we had a snowmobile up into our territory. But somebody opened up the road and it was plowed, and we're driving in and she goes, so who the heck would open up the road? It's a mining company. There's an exploration company, I'm positive there is. So we drove up the road and sure enough we encountered a camp. And we gave them 5 days to get the heck out of there. We were given an ultimatum to pack up this stuff, get the camp out, and leave that place. So we picked them up 5 days after that, they were gone. And it wasn't like we didn't walk in there thinking, we're going to be like super radical badasses, and all this stuff, but it just happened. And not even a year after that, I used to work as an ethnographic researcher, and I got hired by the people in 1996 to do an ethnographic research project on the proposed Pacific Shelf Pipeline project. And I did it. I was a professional researcher, so I didn't come in there with local questions. I came in with open questions and asking people, I explained the project to them, and people looked at it, and nobody knew it was frac gas. It wasn't. I didn't tell anybody it was frac gas. They said it was an LNG pipeline that's being proposed. And 100% of our people said no. I spent the whole year working on this project, interviewing people in their homes, interviewing people in community centers, interviewing people out on the lands, doing field trips with them. And every one of those interviews, everybody absolutely said no to the Pacific Shelf Pipeline project. It was known as a natural gas pipeline project at that time. And when I submitted the report, the government just shelved it, stuck it off to the side, and continued handing out permits. And it was Frida's, one of her territories that were being impacted initially from the coast, from these pipelines. We were punching a pipeline from the coast in through Pascagoula territories, and they're just going to have their way with us. And we decided, no, we can't do that. Like Frida said, we moved out into the territory. 5 years ago, we set up, built a cabin out there, moved into it full time. I gave up my job, my house, my life at that time, my lifestyle. She did the exact same thing. We moved up and we began occupying the territory, and we've been up there for 5 years now. And we managed to keep the Pacific Trust Pipeline project, the Enbridge project, the PNG Alta Gas project, and there's the Coastal GasLink project, which is also another Trans-Canada pipeline that's attempting to bulldoze their way through. We kept all these projects at bay. The Pacific Trails Pipeline project was originally run by a company called Apache, and their partners were EOG and in Canada. And we ran a campaign for the first 2 years we were out there to make sure that these guys left and weren't coming back, and we were going to kill that project. So we went after the investors. We went out to the Royal Bank of Canada. There was a national campaign against the Royal Bank of Canada. We went after all the investment companies, the subsidiary companies that were also investors. And we targeted all their offices. And we had people from all walks of life show up to these offices with banners and with letters from Frida signed by her client saying, you have no consent, you have no permission to come into our territory. All these companies, Apache in Canada and EOG, bailed. They sold all their shares. And we thought we won. We thought we won. But they sold the shares to a company called Chevron. So Chevron bought those shares at rock bottom price. And they didn't mind getting into a dirty fight, because they've already done it. They just came out of Ecuador. You know, the Ecuadorian government is still fighting it. They have a right to sue them now. Man, we didn't want them to do that. We want Chevron to get crippled, we want them to drop and leave, never ever come back again. So we're working closely with our Ecuadorian friends to make sure that they move ahead and start suing this corporation, this American corporation, and made its way into Canada and Ecuador, and this plan on leaving this huge mess behind. So that's what we're left with. We're dealing with the Pacific Trails Pipeline project. Thankfully, the proponents in Kitimat for the LNG plant decided to put their final investment decision on hold. That was just announced last fall. But we're still dealing with the Coastal GasLink project, Trans-Canada. They still feel like they're confident enough, even if the oil prices at rock bottom where they are, and the gas prices, and the financial forecasters are saying, there's no way those prices are going to rise up in a year. They're still going ahead and going to try and push the project. They want the infrastructure in place, so we're dealing with them now. We're working closely with Little Island and Manawatu Camp. Those are our sisters and brothers on the coast and closer to the coast. Our Tsimshian and Gitsan families. And we're working close with them because we're looking after like an incubator of the salmon. Like right now, at this moment, we have trap lines that are running through the territories, and those trap lines are following streams. Those streams have little baby salmon in them, about that big, and have little egg sacs on them yet. They're still under the ice in these beautiful little streams, these brooks, and they're living under the ice and they're waiting for the spring thaw to come. As soon as the water comes, they get washed down into the coast, and they end up right beside Little Island in 4 banks. And they sit there with millions of other little salmon, and they wait a couple of months, and then they swim out to the ocean and attempt to make it back for 3 to 4 years. That's where we have an incubation place for the salmon, and they have a nursery. So it's a deep relationship that we have. We understand that if we stop the pipeline, they're not going to be able to get an LNG plant and tankers on the coast. We can stop the fracking that's happening in northeastern BC. My buddy Caleb was here for Caleb Bain went to university with him. We graduated together. He's still a really close friend of mine. He's come up and visited us many times. We've gone up and visited him. And his territories are decimated from fracking. If you don't really understand the impacts of hydraulic fracturing on the landscape, think about the northern shield in northern Canada as being like a big sponge. Because if you fly over it, you're going to see little lakes all over the place. It's just like a sponge laying over a big flat rock. that sponge is called aquifer. The hydraulic fracturing, northeastern BC, they're trying to push into the Yukon now. The Yukon people are fighting back saying, no, we don't want any fracking. But northeastern BC is just saturated with hydraulic fracturing. But aquifers are saturated now with these crazy chemical concoctions that they've created to try and get gas out of the rock. And it's pouring into the Arctic Ocean. Right beside the tar sands. Tar sands are doing the exact same thing. Slightly different chemicals, but the impact is the same. So we have the hydraulic fracturing fields in northeastern BC and tar sands right beside it, both of them dumping their toxins into the ocean. And where does it end up? The oceans are all connected. They're not like all these separate little bodies of water. They're one giant body of water on a beautiful earth that we all call home. It's moving through the currents. The salmon that we're trying to protect right now have to swim through those currents. They're already dealing with this stuff. They have to deal with human pollution, agriculture, human waste. Whenever you take birth control pills or antibiotics, your body doesn't absorb it, process it all, flushes a lot of it out, ends up in a sewage system. So the sewage systems go to treatment plants. They don't fully treat them. They try and meet a certain grade of processing before they release it into the environment again. And you accumulate all of that all the way down the rivers. What do you think ends up going into the ocean? The salmon had to swim through that. We have Fukushima in Japan. And in the 1950s and 1940s, they were doing nuclear testing in the South Pacific. Our salmon still have to swim through that pool of radioactive water as well. They're swimming by all of these, they have incredible amount of crap they have to go through before they make it back home again. And it's scary. I'm seriously contemplating my life consuming salmon now. I come from a salmon culture. And I'm seriously contemplating the idea of just harvesting freshwater fish that stay and live in the rivers that we fish on. And I'm scared to eat salmon. Because we're losing elder after elder after elder from cancer.
Yes.
People are dying from cancer. The only thing that they all have in common is they're salmon people. They consume a lot of salmon. So I have to start, I'm a researcher by trade. I do a lot of science and understand there's cumulative impacts that occurred. There's one common denominator that sits with all those elders who passed away. They all ate the same salmon. That's scary. It's scary as an indigenous person who comes from a salmon culture to actually start contemplating this idea of maybe it's not good for me anymore. Sad. Nobody thinks about this. Nobody talks about it. But I do, because I've got children, I want grandchildren one day, and I want to make sure those grandchildren grow up strong and healthy. And I'm going to make sure that we make a legal world behind that isn't being destroyed by greed and corruption anymore. I want to leave a world behind that is actually beginning to restore itself, to bring itself back to healing, so that our great-great-grandchildren will have something to look forward to, because right now they don't. We're not acting enough right now. We're not doing enough to make sure that happens. And I love Carlene's words when she said that we need to work together. I don't think we have a choice. We shouldn't sit back and go, well, I'll think about this in maybe about 3 months. We'll try and call another meeting to talk about this. And maybe in about 2 years, we'll have an organized body that's ready to become mobilized. We don't have that luxury. We honestly don't. If we're going to do anything, we have to do it now. We can't wait for somebody else to do it either. We have to collectively make up our mind to do something about it. Because it's not going to spontaneously happen on its own. It takes people like me and you to make sure that happens. What's that?
mention, if you'd like to take a look at our stewardship policy, it's on our website at www.twnation.ca. And our assessment of the Kinder Morgan pipeline expansion, which I should have mentioned, is our traditional knowledge backed by Western science, and that's why our council was comfortable going through to say, no, we don't give consent to this project. You can find that assessment at our website at www.twnSacredTrust.ca.
Thank you very much. Another round of warm applause for our panel here. We're going to have a bit of a dialogue after the next speaker. And I guess what I just want to say before we talk about that is I think the whole question of control, of us taking greater control of our territories is really essential, and that's generally the message that I guess most of the panels here are really talking about, and it sort of leads up to our discussion now, our hearing Gujao, who is from the Haida Gwaii, and they have been really at the forefront of a lot of the Aboriginal rights and title discussion, both in the courts and in terms of negotiations and in terms of making different kinds of agreements with the province and federal government about how they would get greater control and certainty in terms of their recognition of their rights. And I'd like to invite Joe up here to explain and talk about his nation. Welcome again here to
Hello again. I seen on the panel it said one of the things they wanted me to speak about was Indigenous law. And so there's two different things. One is Indigenous law and Aboriginal law. Indigenous law is that which is from the place, and that's our own laws. And the Aboriginal law is consider the laws of Canada that they're developing. And it's one of the tools that we have to use, that we have in our war chest. Certainly by itself, I wouldn't say that it's the only thing that anybody should be doing. Because, for one thing, you put your life in the hands of somebody else. If you go into someone else's court case, you're expecting a decision from somebody who you don't know, and they don't know your people, and you really don't know which way the decision's going to go. The Indigenous law is our own law, and to be honest about it, it's something that isn't written, so a lot of it is gone, and it's little bits you get in stories here and there about how people handle situations and what they did to deal with people. And some of that is quite interesting. But the indigenous law does bid us to look after our land. And it's one of the teachings that you get from all of our elders. And, you know, today we're kind of faced with this dilemma of people who are used to being poor all the time, and opportunities are knocking, and some people are quite anxious to seize that, and other people are thinking of their land, as the previous speakers. You know, I'm so happy to hear of people doing real things, and we're facing this kind of like a beast with no conscience and no real reasoning behind it. It's totally out of touch with the land, and is run strictly by charts and economic flows and things like that. Some of the indigenous laws amongst our people, one of the highest laws is of respect, and when the laws are working, there's little need to be enforcing laws or doing anything. Everybody knows how to behave around other people, and what's acceptable and what's not becomes more societal, and people live with it. But some of our own laws were quite harsh when you hear the stories. Like one, and this again is an indigenous way that things are dealt with. And there was one of the kids in our village got hurt pretty bad, and the other kid made up some stories that got the other one the blame, and it almost ended up that the village was in a big fight, and people would have died if this thing carried through. And finally, the truth came out, and they took that kid and they fixed him down at low tide and let the tide come up over him. And cruel as that sounds, it stopped a lot of trouble that would have been intergenerational. It would have been people would have died, and that kind of harsh dealing with people made sure that those kind of lies don't occur again. That kind of trouble. And so with the Aboriginal law, again, it's the courts of Canada and how it bears out. And most of us in here can easily remember the days when the laws were quite fixed against us. And laws change, and laws develop, and that's what's been going on, particularly over the last 20 years, and really in the last 5 years, we're really seeing many material kind of changes. And the laws, if you look at all the cases that have contributed to where we are today, where there's really nobody, no industry or no business that can come into our territories now and just do as they please, as they would have only a few years ago. But yet, we'll find that we have to continually be vigilant. Some of the most effective things that happened are the kind of things that you just heard from the previous speakers, where people stood up under their own indigenous law and their responsibility to the land and took action. And the laws of, that we have in place today are largely shaped by our ability to affect, particularly affect the big money, and especially the pipelines. There's even people amongst our own people who are sitting back and saying, well, that's so big, it's inevitable, it's going to happen, there's nothing we can do about it, and ready to let it happen. But there was enough people around and enough of our nations ready to make the stand, enough of our neighbors, enough of the neighboring communities to actually be inspired and say no to it as well. And it has been a way that big money has not only ruled our people, but it's ruled events around the world where we see these mines that have come and gone, some of them are still creating havoc. And all of us are dragged into this thing and all a part of it. Whether we're driving cars or using their technology, we're all part of the problem. And so that we have to face up to. And so there is compromises that we have to consider. Some of the things that we've considered in our the things that we're doing is certainly our highest priority is to look after the land and to make sure that our culture can continue. But at the same time, we have people who have come to expect a certain level of service. And anybody living in our villages knows that it's not enough. But for instance, in our own island, which is easy to measure, each band council brings in about over $10 million for their services that they have to their people. And as well, there's another 2 hospitals and 2 clinics that probably easily cost $10 million a year. And electricity there is another $10 million in subsidies, and their highways and ferries, probably another $10 million. So $50 million worth of services that we have to consider. And if we're going to come up with a solution, and that solution provides a lower level of service than the minor kind of service that we have now, we would never get it past our own people. And in the previous presentation, I showed what we've done. We cut the lobby in half, we protected half the landscape, we gave more protection to the rivers and the wildlife and that sort of thing. We got joint management over everything, and we ended up controlling more than half of the lobby that continued. But out of all that, we certainly don't get anywhere near 50 million bucks a year, we look after ourselves. You know, there are ways that we got to consider. You know, for instance, anybody goes to get medical help, usually you'll walk out of there with some pills. They'll never, ever sit and tell you that there's something the matter with your diet, and tell you good things to eat. And certainly, if all of us ate the way our ancestors had eaten and stayed away from the stores, we'd be a lot healthier than we are now. And so those sort of things are kind of a long-term goal. So in the meantime, we do have a tremendous tool in the laws of Canada. I spoke a little bit about the title case that we have filed, and you know, we've never advanced it, but we've used it. You know, we're quite prepared to bring it forward, and the alternative to the way things are presently to having title over our land in Canadian law is certainly a lot better. But however, we have been able to make these agreements that we made, whether it's for protecting land, the timber that we hold. There's two separate licenses that we hold for that. One comes from the provincial government and one comes from our own government. And we've made land designations before provincial government ever made land designations to protect the lands that we protected. And, you know, that's not necessarily the way our people did business before. You know, they didn't sit and make land designations, they didn't make orders and councils and that sort of thing, but yet it is a way to really organize and to do things on our own. So one of the first treaties that was ever made was made around the area that New York sits in right now. And that treaty was called the Two-Row Wampum. That is how it is expressed. There's a wampum belt that they use in their areas, and it's just really simple. It's about 2 lines. And all it means is that they'll keep on their line and we'll keep on our line. We'll have our life, you have your life, we'll live alongside each other, and everything should be fine. And you know, for the time when the original people were the majority there, it's pretty hard to foresee what was to come. And at the time, I think even for the Pilgrims who had worked out that agreement, for them that was ideal as well. But things change, and it's changed for not only our own people, but for everybody, all of humanity, as money took hold and money started to run what happens in government and dictate what happens to the land. And you know, like this Kamloops certainly relies on the resources, extracting the resources, whether it's the trees or the mines or any of that for it to function. And then all of us have been kind of made into these consumers of the goods that are for sale there. So, you know, the main pastime seems to be shopping. And I think one of the best, most poignant things that was ever done in the last few years was when 9/11 happened, and two big towers come crashing down, and there was reports coming in out of the States, all the planes shut down, and they said people were actually sitting around and talking about life, like, what's this really, what are we here for, what's going on, and the economy was slowing down, and George Bush got up and said, keep shopping. And that says so much for what we've become, and I say we, including the indigenous people, the black people, the Asians, everybody has become shoppers and consumers, and so we work for these companies that are destroying the land, and everybody feels innocent. All of us, feel like somebody else is doing it, but it's all of us together. And so, that doesn't really simplify things for us to realize that, but it's but I think we've got to face that, and face the role that we play in this thing. And every one of us that send our kids to school, basically that's what's happening, and they are being taught how to fit into this big machinery that is gobbling up the earth. And so the real interesting dilemma of today is how do we deal with this situation where we have basically amongst all of our people, we have a full range of human beings, and the good, the bad, and the ugly amongst us, angels and devils. We got everything. And, so how do we as a people start to wrestle with some of these ideas? I did mention that there's a lot of money around right now. There's a lot of money being passed off to some of our own people. Some higher people have taken their money and working for them. There's, I know that they've done that all the way along the pipeline routes. Not only that, but almost all of the newspapers from Haida Gwaii right up to northern BC, and has been bought up by David Black, who intends to put in a oil refinery. So they come up with these interesting games. Okay, they say now we'll not bring crude bitumen from the tar sands. Rather, we'll refine it and put it on tankers and ship it out refined. And so, there are people who are buying that notion, but refined oil is not any better than bitumen in the water. Any of it is poison to the fish, the smallest little things that the fish eat. And so the fights seem to go on and on. It was over 30 years ago we fought against, maybe 40 years ago, we fought against a similar idea to bring oil into Kitimat. Now we're fighting a project. They want to bring it out of Kitimat or out of Prince Rupert. Another, 15 years ago, we were up against, they wanted to drill for oil in the water between Haida Gwaii and the mainland. And again, they talked about the trillions of cubic meters of oil and gas and all the wonderful economy that would spin off this thing. The premier was quite, he was going to light the Olympic torch with oil from the Hecate Strait. And, so we had to fight that again. And for the leaders who are fighting these things and the people who stand, there's no net gain. You don't, like you fight these things, you win these things, you don't gain anything. All we're trying for is to preserve what we have. It's not a gain, but we prevented there from being tremendous loss amongst our people. And so the indigenous law does fit in with the Aboriginal law in that the Supreme Court and other the provincial courts now are looking to hear, okay, what is the indigenous law? What are your own laws? And it is important that we pull those together. And our people don't have necessarily a book of laws that say, okay, here is our law. Like it's to understand it is quite deep, sometimes it sounds like eye for an eye, but yet it's when the deeper you understand it, you understand why they did some of those things that they did. So, there's opportunities with the laws that are there. The opportunities, I think, in reconciliation certainly have got to include how do we reconciliation is really the wrong word, because reconciliation is like when people break up and try to come back together again. But if you never had a relationship, it's really conciliation, I guess. And it has to include the people who live in your area. How do you how do you plan out a life that's going to include everybody? Because we're certainly not here by ourselves, and there's a lot of other people who have families and have a life that they have to consider, that we have to consider. And we also have to consider just what is it in the future that we need, what is it that we want, and how do we save this planet that we live on. So that's, I think, really where we are right now. But any kind of actions that we've been successful in included laws, included alliances, whether the local people or neighboring tribes. It required planning, like what's going to happen with our land. Required a lot of artful stratagem. How are we going to beat these guys? The industries and that we're facing aren't human beings, though in the United States they're considered persons. I don't know about in Canada, but nasty persons, stupid persons, because they don't think of everything, they only think of money. And So that's what we're up against, and it's not used to really dealing with deeper issues of art. It's not used to dealing with broader issues of the land and the earth. And so that's our struggle from now on, and you know, the fight, the squabbling amongst ourselves is old. It happens everywhere. It's a deterrent. The Ainu of Japanese is a deterrent from them getting forward. In the Amazon, the different tribes there squabble amongst themselves to get into the village. They're squabbling in the village, much like our own. And so those are you know, the more immediate things that we have to deal with. Find ways where people can sit together with their differing ideas and try to come up with the answer. There we go. I think so.
Yeah, that's fine. Dialogue, you can ask
Okay,
questions.
could you explain your governance structure, like if you're doing all of these things under the,
elected band council system or a council of people, or how are you guys doing it?
We, like everybody else, have band councils in the 2 villages. But we also have hereditary chiefs. And we, in the 70s, I guess, we started a separate political organization. It's the Council of the Haida Nation. It's not a registered society or anything. It's our own council. It has our own constitution. It brings in the 2 chief councillors, have a seat on that council. There's 12 people elected, plus the president, vice president, plus the 2 chief councillors, and the hereditary chiefs council has a role in, you know, for instance, if the council of the Haida Nation came to something they figured might be a treaty, first it would go to the chiefs. If the chiefs reject it, it just bounces back. If they accept it, then it goes to a vote of the whole people. And in every case on the council, it requires a 3/4 majority. On the chief's table, it requires a 3/4 majority, and amongst the people, it requires a 3/4 majority.
So is the chiefs table the elected chiefs plus the hereditary chiefs?
No, the hereditary chiefs have their own table.
Do the elected chiefs have a table?
The elected chiefs have a village council. And so they have, you know, they're responsible for the services of the village, and but they also, each of the chiefs has a seat at the council of the Haida.
Coach John?
But then, probably more important is there's a house of assembly where the rules, the laws are passed, and in every person that goes in there with, you know, you need 40 people to have a quorum, and everybody goes in there has one vote, whether you're a chief or a president or you know, anybody 16 years and over can speak and run for elections and vote on the motions that go forward.
And what is your total population, like, of, say, voting members?
We don't really have a good number on it, but we got people in Alaska as well, so we got them right across the border, but we consider 5,000 Haida. And we don't go by band lists or anything.
Do your hereditary chiefs still attain status through potlatch?
Yes,
And are they equal to elected chiefs, or do they have a different kind of status?
oh, it's totally different. It's, you know, the chief is the head of different clans, and, there's about 20 chiefs. And, each of them has clans, and, there's 2 villages now, but, you know, in the past, there was more like about 40 villages. And then there was, you know, little fish camps and stuff, and so you can see the difficulty in trying to make a treaty as they laid it out. You know, there's no land you can surrender because everybody knows where they're from, and you can't, you know, whose land are you going to give up?
You have declared rights and title on all of Haida Gwaii.
Yes,
Do you not have the right in that case to shut down the airports, shut down the docks and so on, and only allow people to come in that have permission to come?
I'm sure we could do that. You know, we don't, we haven't done that, you know, because people coming in isn't a big threat to us. So generally, people coming there to visit are coming in respectfully, and, you know, we fought against sport fishing because it's a whole different thing. You know, people are coming in to get away from the old lady, get drunk and kill stuff. And,
Well, we heard from the young lady this morning about having put up a blockade on their bridge, and they said, no, if you're not here to benefit us, you can't come aboard. I don't know whether that would work on Haida Gwaii or not.
oh, if we thought that was our biggest threat, you know, like our bigger threats are like pipelines and things like that, not visitors. We don't get a lot of visitors there, you know, like from Vancouver, you could fly to Hawaii cheaper than there. If you fly to Cuba, you know, it costs, you know, $500-600 to fly up there, you know, or else we drive all the way around. So by the time you get there, you're there to enjoy it.
Is the Naikun project going ahead?
The which?
Naikun, the wind.
No. Not at this point, anyway. You know, our own people rejected wind farm. You know, like wind would be seen as environmentally green and something that would be acceptable, but the scale of it, I think, scared our people. You know, it's huge. Each one of those things is like 400 meters in a circle down here. So our people said no, and it's stopped for now.
Thanks for your presentation. It was really helpful to hear all you worked through for so long. I'm just wondering if you could, it's a simple question. Do you think that if you're governed entirely by your traditional governance, and let's say there were no Inuit chiefs and councils to have to deal with, do you think you'd protect the land better with that? You know where I'm going with this question.
No, the reason why we organize that way is because, you know, when you're dealing with governments and, you know, there's a lot of technical kind of things that need to be done. You know, like for instance, we developed our mapping system so that it was better than the province was doing in forestry. I mean, anybody who's dealt with referrals, you know, consultations, if you get a little map saying we're going to lodge here, and you see a few squiggly lines and you don't even know where it is, you know, you try to fit it on your map somewhere, and you know, so we've developed systems so we can track everything that's occurring on the island We got archaeological people scanning, we're, making maps with our Haida names and, all the villages and all the points of land and islands and everything that we could find. So there's a lot of technical work, and we work closely with the chiefs, but it works fine as it is. And the way it's organized, I think when the people really are the ones to determine the direction that we go, generally the principal ideas are the ones that prevail.
So you're saying that it works in a very harmonious way because a lot of the decision making comes from the people. Or that-
All of the decision making, ultimately the people decide. But the chiefs are integral to the way that we're organized. Not saying that it'll be like that forever, but it's the way it is right now.
Any more questions? Oh, we have one there.
I've really been impressed the last few days.
Can't hear you, just a second. Need that. Talking this or?
I've been impressed the last 3 days by the one theme that seems to run through everything is the need to unite. And this morning, Carlene Thomas emphasized that quite well, I think, and almost pleaded with everybody to unite. And I was sort of sitting here after a discussion over the table at noon and wondering how does one unite if people don't seem to be able to talk together? And that's what she said. She said that she wished that where she is, she could talk to the neighbors right next door, but she can't. She sees something different up here. Well, that was my thinking. And then I thought, well, today, with all the technological advances, is there any way that something like a VAS could be instituted on an indigenous level to coordinate, get people talking together on specific projects that they would like to see done?
Something like a what?
Like a VAS, are you familiar with the VAS? AVAAZ.
No, I don't know.
Oh, well, it's probably the largest program on the internet. It has millions and millions of followers around the world. And they have, they ask people if there's a really social problem, you just write it out and you get people to vote on it. And you put pressure on governments that way. The VAS uses a lot of their weight by pressuring governments through the number of signatures they get on their petitions. So you can make up a petition, and that thing goes on. There's no criteria you have to particularly supply, you just have to write up a petition. And then it's flashed around the world. There are many, I'm sure there are many people. How many people here know of or belong to or have written a petition for a VAS? Quite a number. So I was just thinking that, is there a way for, now, I'm not saying that you'd want to go to a VAS and just become another petitioner. You might want to start a site like a VAS. A VAS has already done a lot of the bootleg work. Oh, pardon me. The legwork here already, and they have a tremendous following. And they're very socially aware. In fact, I think that's one of their constitutional things. And,
You know, I know that the technology and the communications has had a big effect on a lot of things around the world, and you know, certainly it's changed things from what they are, and you know, I think something like that would be really useful for all of us to know. You know, you go to the summit or some of these other places, and you really don't have the people coming forward and saying this is our story. So you know, like we're getting here, we hear some of that, some of the things that are happening, but there isn't any place where you can go there and you know, say, you know, for instance, you know, with Enbridge or somebody, you know, what mine is there, who's affecting you, and so even an investor, when they push the button to see if they should invest there, they'll find out, you know, like who they're affecting and that sort of thing. I think that would be really useful. As far as the matter of people coming together and being able to work together and politically be able to assert themselves, I just want to say that, you know, the Haidas certainly aren't exempt from squabbling, you know, like, and I think it is kind of what happened to us, I guess, is after we got together and people started coming together and sitting in the room until it's resolved, you know, eventually you run out of, you know, you can't get up and give the same argument or the same fight over and over again, so it kind of peters out after a while, and the important things emerge. And so I think that's really the important thing, is getting people to just sit down and start talking about it, whether they have differing views within it. Let's hear the views and then let the people decide.
I'm part of the way in which the VAS operates is that a petition is written, it is quite commonly followed by a story, which is a rationale for the petition, which seems to me to be very similar to the kinds of things that your law is based upon.
Yeah, it is, and I think information is really key to people being able to affect any kind of change. Like if nobody knows the struggle you're into, and you know, everybody's caught up in their own day-to-day stuff, I don't think anybody's going to get anywhere.
This is Carmen Thomas. I think that's a pretty good idea. I'd like to really think about that and see how it could work. Thank you, Gujal, for talking about, you know, how to not be exempt from squabbling. What I meant for us to get together and talk is because we're also related. You know, I heard a leader speak in the circle the other day, is we have to start looking at those bloodline relations and look at it not under the guise of the Indian Act. Because I think I was sharing with somebody yesterday, you know, many of our matrilineal lines come from Squamish. So if I sit down with my Squamish relatives, I can't, you know, so that's my mom, my grandma, my great-grandma. I can't very well look at them and be angry or, you know, try and shut them out, because that would be me telling my mom she doesn't count. So I think what we need to kind of what we need to get over and work through are those oppressor tactics put upon us that because I'm from this reserve and you're from that reserve and you're from this Indian band and you're from that Indian band, we're separate. Like my grandpa always said, you know, he always used the word divide and rule. And when I was a young woman thinking about it, I kept thinking, and in my culture, you don't interrupt your elders. I would always forget about it by the end of the conversation. I wanted to correct him and say, the phrase is divide and conquer. What I understood, I finally understood him when I was at an Idle No More rally in Vancouver in 2011 or 2012. And I was standing outside the City Hall of Vancouver, and I just happened to look to my left, and there was Burrard Inlet, and I looked back in front of me, and there was just hundreds and hundreds of First Nations people there. And it sunk in, oh, it's divide and rule because we aren't a conquered people, we are still here. So that's what I mean, we've got to kind of lift ourselves out of that quagmire, that quicksand, that muck that we get stuck in about looking at each other and saying, oh, you're overlapping my territory, so, you know, we gotta be enemies, when we should be looking at each other and saying, okay, so this is where we did this, this, and this, and this is where we all came together to do this, this, and this. We need to protect this together. That's all, that's where I want to get to.
And that's, I think that's a lot of why people intermarry, and, you know, like it's, we got two villages and it's the same thing, you know, you get we're with the line B, but yet when you start taking it apart, you got people from each clan and both villages, you know, so, and it's, you know, it's, of course, you're the one you squabble with the most of the people closest to you, and, you know, like one good example was, we were getting the bones back from all these different museums, they were in drawers and stuff, and some of us wanted to do some genetic work on it, and others just absolutely were against it. So in the end, we said, okay, let go, you know, like, you know, the genetics in us, if you follow your mother's exactly the same, if you want to go through your father's side, but a little more complicated, but you know, you don't really have to, would have been interesting. But in the end, I sort of started figuring out what was the problem, why they were so against it, and it kind of boiled down to that they were scared they might be related to the Tsimshians, who are their closest people.
Greater, thank you for your presence in my life. I'd like to take this time to acknowledge you, to thank you for the honor of gathering together to dialogue, to come to terms with the issues, not only the past, but the present and the future. And I thank you for the words that I've heard today, and I thank you for all the people that are gathering here together so that we can work together. And I ask that you protect my mouth, and I speak from my heart. My name is Chief Kathleen Smith. I'm from Shamakam. I'm an elected leader. I'm also in the treaty process. I'm very honored to be here. My mind, my heart, my soul is like a sponge. It's absorbing so much goodness. There's some issues that I'd like to bring forward is that what is it that we can do? What is it that I can do? What is it that I can share with my family that will make a difference, even if it's this small? I've stopped using toothpaste, face washes, because these products have little micro beads that are made out of plastic, and they're entering into our water systems and our fish are feeding off of them. We can stop buying products that pollute our earth, our waters. And when you touched on the antibiotics, the aerosol sprays, the birth control pills, our cleaning supplies, this is where we can start by abstaining from using these products if they are harmful. I'd like to also target what it is happening in our space, the polluting. The scientists are polluting our space as well, with leaving all of their weather machines and everything just to float around in space. And this bothers me too. This is disrespectful and dishonorable, teaches our children that it doesn't matter. So I'm wondering, where do the scientists and the inventors fit in? Where is the consultation for them when they bring out new ideas and different sciences? Because the fracking, that was done by scientists developing that. So how do we approach the scientists and the inventors? How do we have a say before the big corporations buy their products that are meant to destroy our earth for capitalism? I like the idea, every time I see a child or I'm introduced to a young member that is a teenager, I let them know they are my leaders. It is my obligation today to ensure that there is a foundation of fundamental values and principles and laws that my future leaders can live by, that is entrenched in our fundamental laws, that is unmovable, immovable, and empowered. For our glaciers, it is very important that we really fight to minimize the global heating. Right now we find that the atmosphere picks up the melting glaciers' water and forms them into clouds that are carried across the oceans, and this is why we are having such destructive storms. It's because these glaciers don't really come down into our rivers, they're lifted up into our atmosphere and carried elsewhere, and this is why we have such a drastic change in our weather systems. I'd also like to touch on the fact that we do have scientists that are also controlling our weather. There's some states I've read that they can make snowstorms and rain and wind, and this to me is very disturbing, because now how can we differentiate what is actually Mother Earth or man-made? It's mind-boggling. To me, it is mind-boggling, but I want to try to do everything in my power to learn, to share, to become aware of what it is that it is. We're in self-destruction right now, and I'm so happy that we have our women here as leaders with a strong mind and the backbone and the voice to speak. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be a strong voice with a strong backbone and my feet planted firmly on the ground. And I wish to say thank you again for allowing me to be in this territory, and I respect and honor every one of you. Kuch.
Thank you.
think there's one or two more questions.
Thank you so much. I probably could have saved this for a couple of items down when we talk about networking and supporting each other. But I just want to thank Dan and Arthur and the organizers, Nicole and others who organized this, because what I find so interesting here, there's the space. You are creating a space that I find that we don't have on the East Coast. And basically, even though there's tensions in the room and so forth, you're creating this space, and I hope that we find a way to encourage that we can carry on spaces like this. And why I say that is because when we talk about working together and trying to network together, what I have found in my part of the country, what happens, it's our Indigenous laws of respect that you were talking about, it turns around on people that are dissenting. And they use that to discipline dissent. And I think there's a fine balance between these formal processes that the government will only recognize in terms of elected chiefs, the AFN, tribal councils, and so forth. But they have a way of shutting down dissent. And that is one of my biggest worries. I've seen it happen. And then what happens if you do not have any other alternative resources, which Sherry Pasternak, I think she has to lead it's done a lot of work on this, they will cut off basic services to your community one way or the other. And I'm pointing this out not just not to say, oh, we can't do anything. I'm pointing it out these out as strategic moves in terms of helping us to move forward. And I think the elected chiefs here, I think it's honorable that you're here and to particularly listen to the defenders of the land who are out there on the front lines, because we know the government will recognize, and they will only recognize their own system under the Indian Act. And this makes it difficult for people who try to bring their Indigenous laws and their Indigenous approaches. And it's just an observation, having been, people have been trying to shut me down for so long. But anyways, I just wanted to share that. And I do thank for all the stories. This has been great to hear, particularly from the people on the ground that are in the front line, on the front lines. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. You got coffee outside?
Yes, there's treats and coffee outside.
Could we just break for one more? Okay. Right there.
There's two more questions.
The sideshow. My name is Wendy Brown. I come from Prince Lake, BC, and is Lake Valley Nation. I'm also a Grand Ultra athlete. Now what that means is I'm a Grand Ultra marathon runner. Now what that means is I can run in hundreds of miles. The longest distance I've run is 217 miles in 12 days and raised $400,000. That was to help the city of Fort St. John because of their generous donation of donating $50,000 to my community when we had our mill explosion in 2012. I did a 30-hour indoor walk at their indoor track in Fort St. John, only to find out a week later that $50,000 had been donated altogether. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I went to all the companies and the people that came to me at the indoor track to hear my story and why I was doing this walk. They left the building making announcements. They've been contacting radio stations, newspaper stations, TV stations. I was interviewed on my last lap, on my last hour at the indoor track, and I couldn't believe it, how people came together for me to help me through this, because I couldn't go home to help my family at the time. First of all, the roads were too dangerous. I couldn't travel back to help. I couldn't afford the flight home, and I was working as a carrier, so I ended up having to stay. And a week after, my boss pulled me in to debrief with me, asked me how I was doing. I told her I'm a walking time bomb, I'm ready to explode. She said, well, what do you think you're gonna do at this time? I said, I need to help them, I don't know how. Then I started seeing families post, we're running out of money, what am I gonna do? My partner's been air back to Vancouver, my partner's been air back to Victoria, my partner's been air back to Edmonton, how am I gonna survive? That's when I decided to step up and do this walk. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is through my separation and divorce, I vowed that I was going to begin reconciliation with me, not just with me, but with my kids as well. I'm very thankful that I made that decision at the time that I did, because my kids grew up seeing only one family, one group. Didn't matter what color the person was next to them, they don't see that. To this very day, I'm very thankful. My oldest daughter attends here, majoring in sociology right now, secondary university. I am extremely proud. She's got a whole variety of friends, and I always tell myself, I did good. I'm doing good. And the reason I chose to step up and help the city of Fort St. John when I did that run to raise 400,000 is because I grew up on my grandparents. And what I learned from them when we were growing up, we traveled from one community to another and we helped each other out. It didn't matter where. Whenever they had a community member passing, my grandfather heard about it and he never wasted no time. My grandmother never wasted no time. They made the effort, the time, and they did whatever they could to get there to help support the family that lost someone. And I vowed after my grandfather, especially when he was the one that passed away last, that I would do the best I can to continue to carry on what he did, and I'm doing the best I can. So thank you very much for listening, and I pray and I hope that one day to find out that this will send out a rippling effect that you guys need to know, or maybe not really need to know, but it's really important that reconciliation begins with you. Thank you.
So I guess we'll just do the one last question and then go for a break.
I'm kind of wondering whether I should actually say this or not. It might be somewhat pessimistic. There are always two sides to a coin, and the old adage is that with a heavy ship, a big ship takes a long time to change direction. This has been going on for a long time now. This kind of treatment of indigenous people around the world, not just in Canada or North America, but it's been going on around the world. Resources are extracted at a rate to supply